And once again, welcome back to the Brittany Hughes Show, everybody. If you happen to get stuck in this week's absolute cluster at the airports, by the way, my condolences to you. Thankfully, I was not flying anywhere. My husband was jet-setting around a little bit this week, so thankfully it didn't mess up our plans too terribly much, but the airports were absolutely a mess over this past week. Of course, due to a glitch in the FAA system that completely bungled everything, left a lot of flights sitting on the ground, just totally threw a monkey wrench in the flight schedule for a whole bunch of people. Of course, a lot of people are blaming Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg for this. I personally don't believe that he is directly to blame for a glitch in the FAA system. I think it's a little bit silly to say that this is entirely and completely his direct fault. But then again, I was also told that President Donald Trump was personally responsible for a whole bunch of people getting a contagious flu bug. So apparently here we are. So if by that standard, if we're just going to stay consistent here, then this is all Pete Buttigieg's fault and he should probably resign post-hasty because he apparently cannot do his job. If you got caught up in all of that mess, though, I hope you got where you were supposed to go safely, if not a little bit unhappily. Also this week, of course, and I want to address this at the outset, our hearts and thoughts and our prayers go out to the family of Lynette Hardaway, also known as Diamond, of the conservative commentary duo Diamond and Silk, who very unexpectedly passed away at the beginning of this week. Obviously, I think that was a shock to a whole lot of people, especially those that have followed that pair's viral videos and shows over the past few years. This was something that nobody was expecting, and I know left a whole lot of people stunned and heartbroken. So we obviously are praying for her family and for comfort in this time. But of course, that didn't stop rabid leftists from jumping all over this and using this poor woman's death and the tragedy in her family to mock her family, and to mock conservatives as supposed stupid anti-vaxxers. So first of all, Lynette Hardaway passed away at the age of 51. We don't know what she passed away from. This is something that was announced very suddenly. It was announced by former President Donald Trump on Truth Social, and then it was confirmed on Diamond and Silk's official Twitter page. So we have absolutely no idea at this juncture what this woman died of. Frankly, nor do we really need to know. We don't deserve to know that. If her family wants to put that out there, that is completely and totally their choice. But that's really none of our business. All that matters is that this lady passed away. And as far as I'm concerned, if you didn't like her, if you can't say something nice, then, you know, as the old adage goes, don't say anything at all. This is a woman who passed away. This is a family that is mourning and grief-stricken right now. So there's really no reason to jump all over this and mock her, regardless of your political views, regardless of whether or not you were a fan of hers or whether you couldn't stand a thing this woman had to say. That's not the point. The point is that this is a tragedy in a human being's life, in a family's life, and that deserves to be respected. But of course, that's not what the left is doing right now. They are using her death as a political punching bag to score points. And one of the ways that they're doing this, of course, is to immediately blame her death on COVID, mocking her as an anti-vaxxer and a COVID skeptic who then died of COVID. And they find this absolutely hilarious. Leftists over on Twitter find this to be the most hilarious thing ever. This is the most fantastic and ironic thing, that this poor woman died of COVID after spending the last couple of years complaining about COVID. There's one problem, however. We have absolutely no idea that that's what she died of. So rumors that Hardaway was suffering with COVID first began in an article from a Black news website called Blevity. Never heard of it. That's okay. Neither had I. But apparently they published an article after she was hospitalized back in November with an unknown illness. They came out and said she was sick in the hospital with COVID. Now, that article has since been deleted, but that's what made up the basis for a whole lot of other articles on left-leaning news outlets, and published and pushed out there by a whole bunch of liberal pundits who thought, again, this was the most hilarious thing ever. It turns out that that article has since been taken down off of the outlet's website. Talk about fake news, by the way. This is exactly what leftists accuse conservatives of doing. all of these, rabid conservative websites that put all of this fake news out there, and they just gin up the rumor mill and they get everything going. And the next thing you know, it's spreading like wildfire. That's what they accuse us of doing all the time. But here you've got a left-leaning news outlet, online website, that puts out an article that they even take down because it could not be substantiated. And that starts the rumor mill churning that Hardaway was in fact sick with COVID. That was around Thanksgiving time. So when she returned to her Newsmax show that she shared with her sister in about mid-December, she denied that she was sick with COVID. She said that those claims were not true. That ended up being her last broadcast. And after her death this past week, critics automatically assumed that she had in fact died of COVID. They had already assumed that she was sick with COVID. That must be what she's in the hospital from. After all, people that are critical of COVID, people that are critical of the vaccine can't ever die of anything other than COVID. The universe won't allow that, irony of ironies. So they automatically assumed this week that she died from COVID complications. So literally, and I'm sitting there on Twitter when news breaks that Hardaway had passed away. I am sitting there on Twitter, and I'm actually kind of searching around to make sure, is this actually true? Is this just something that, nobody could really know what to believe in the first 30 seconds or minute? You kind of wait for those reports to be confirmed. Not 2 minutes after those reports were confirmed, leftists, blue checkmark. I'm not talking about just the dregs, right? I'm not talking about just the trolls with no identity who get on there and say a whole bunch of garbage. I'm not talking about just those. I am talking about confirmed blue checkmark liberal pundits that you would know. Get on there and immediately start using this woman's death as a reason to bash conservatives, to bash Trump supporters, to bash MAGA Nation or whatever, to bash anybody that had asked questions about the COVID lockdowns, to anybody that may be skeptical about the COVID vaccine. We're all just a bunch of complete and total morons, and this woman's death proves it, and quite frankly, she got what she deserved. Never mind that they have no proof whatsoever that she actually died of COVID. Even Newsweek reported. Some social media users have claimed that Hardaway, who was reportedly 51, died from COVID. But this has not been confirmed by her family or the group page. Many of these claims are made on the basis of a report from website publication Blavity, which now appears to be unavailable. Well, fancy that. At least Newsweek's being honest here. Unlike a whole bunch of leftists that were more than happy to run with this line, not because it was proven, not because they had any evidence whatsoever that what they were saying was true. They didn't care. This fit their narrative. They wanted it to be true that this woman died of COVID, regardless of whether she did. They wanted it so bad that they didn't stop to actually Google whether or not it could be true before they pushed it because it was convenient to their narrative. It was way too good of a detail to seize on, to push a political agenda. So a couple of things to that point. First of all, let's assume for just a second that Hardaway did in fact pass away of COVID. Again, that's not ours to know. We have absolutely no right to that information. But even if she did, that was her risk to take. That's been the entire point from the beginning. The point has never been that COVID can't kill people. I think we all accept at this point that this, for some people, is a deadly disease. Still is, was back in the day. That's never been the point. The point is that a free people have the right to make their own health assessments, regardless of what the consequences of those may or may not be. A free people have the right to decide whether or not they want to get a shot against something. A free people have the right to decide whether or not they want to take the risk to go outside and be around the public, send their kids to school. And people make health assessments, by the way, every single day. This is not new. For some reason, we've put COVID in this separate category that's like, this completely different thing when it comes to health and risk assessments, that people need to be protected from themselves. We make health assessments every single day. We take risks every single day. Every single time you pick up a piece of food and put it in your mouth. Every single time you go to a restaurant and consume something that you did not personally cook. Every single time you make a choice at the grocery store. Every single time you get in your car and send it careening down the highway at 75 miles per hour. We make health assessments every single day. whether we realize it or not. And a free people have the right to make health assessments about what diseases they are going to risk being exposed to and what they are not, based on their personal beliefs, based on their personal health situation. This was her risk to take, regardless, just like it's yours, just like it's mine. We have absolutely no idea that she passed away from COVID, but even if she did, she had the right to take a shot or not take a shot. She had the right to expose herself or not expose herself to germs. That's been the argument from the beginning. But of course, the left wants to paint every single anti-vaxxer as some sort of complete and total moron with their head buried in the sand, which, side note here, being a COVID vaccine skeptic does not make you an anti-vaxxer. I'm really sick of this terminology because it's being used as a pejorative against people that, are apparently science-denying idiots who probably also believe that the earth is flat. That's how this term is being used. Being a COVID vaccine skeptic is not being an anti-vaxxer. You may still take other vaccines. You may still give them to your children. And by the way, the COVID vaccine is not a true vaccine. It's an mRNA jab. It does something very different than a true vaccine. It doesn't actually inoculate you against the virus itself. We know that now. We have ample evidence and admissions from health experts that this is not a shot that actually inoculates you against a disease, against a virus. That's what a true vaccine does. A true vaccine seeks to inoculate you against catching a virus. But this jab doesn't do that. At best, it might keep you from getting very, very sick and getting hospitalized and potentially dying. At worst, it may end up causing a bunch of heart problems, which I think we've started to see evidence of. Seems pretty obvious to most people with a brain and two eyeballs. Okay, so this is not an actual true vaccine by definition of the word. So being a COVID vaccine skeptic doesn't actually make you an anti-vaxxer, but that word is being thrown around because it's a euphemism for calling somebody a moron. And that's the basis that leftists are using to basically say that this woman got exactly what she deserved. But believe it or not, COVID skeptics and COVID vaccine skeptics can, in fact, die of things that are not COVID related. I know that that's really, really hard for liberals to believe, but it is possible that somebody that was very vocal and outspoken against the COVID vaccine may have actually passed away from something different. At the end of the day, however, it doesn't ultimately matter what Hardaway passed away from. If someone dies and your response is anything other than sincere sympathy and condolences, you are a terrible excuse for a human being. I don't care what side of the political aisle you are on. If someone passes away, particularly of an illness and it's unexpected, and you don't say anything other than, I am terribly, terribly sorry for your loss, you suck. You suck. If that person's death becomes your punching bag, becomes the punchline to your joke, becomes some basis for mockery because they happen to be on a different side of the political aisle from you, you suck. And by the way, this is what I think is interesting here because we've kind of seen a duality over the past week. So branch Covidians and leftist propagandists and proponents of the government line and government control, they are now defending their response to Hardaway's death and all of the mockery and all of the laughter to COVID skeptics' reaction to Damar Hamlin's collapse on the football field last week. Here's the difference. This is an apples to spaceships comparison, not even the same thing. Conservatives and COVID vaccine skeptics did not rejoice at Hamlin's collapse. They did not rejoice at that medical emergency. They were extremely concerned. And do I think that some people may have jumped the gun in automatically attributing that medical episode to the vaccine? Perhaps, and we can talk about that in a minute. But any question as to whether or not the vaccine may have been involved in that medical emergency, or be related to a number of otherwise healthy athletes and other people who have experienced heart problems, any concern over that was born out of a genuine concern that this shot may be unsafe and may be causing health problems to otherwise healthy people. And that this is a potentially unsafe vaccine that was being forced on people who may not have felt like they had the choice to say no. Again, when you're an athlete and you're Aaron Rodgers or you're Kyrie Irving or you're somebody that's a little bit higher in the upper echelons of the athletic world, maybe you feel emboldened, maybe you feel powerful enough, you've already made your money, you've already got your claim to fame, you've already made a name for yourself. I think a lot of those guys felt emboldened in the platform that they already had to push back against something that they didn't want. I'm not saying it didn't cost them anything. I'm not saying that it wasn't still bold. None of that. I'm simply saying that I think that when you are lower down in the totem pole, maybe you're an athlete just getting your start. Maybe you're a younger guy. Maybe you're a college athlete trying to break into the pros. Or maybe you're not an athlete at all. Maybe you're just a regular guy out there trying to work your way up the ladder, trying to feed your family, put food on the table. Millions of people that this shot was forced on didn't feel like they had a choice to say no. They didn't feel like they could risk the paycheck that their family depended on, especially at a time when going back and trying to get a job was very, very difficult because the economy was all bungled up. A lot of people didn't feel like they had a fair opportunity to turn this down. A lot of people were put under very stringent mandates to get not just one shot, not just two shots in some cases, but ongoing boosters. This was the problem. It wasn't just that this was a shot that may have had adverse side effects, because it didn't go through a lot of testing. It didn't go through, I should say, a lot of testing over a long term so that the effects long term could be substantially studied and seen. We didn't get a long term. This was very, very rapidly rolled out, and it was immediately pushed on people. And a lot of people didn't get a choice. It's really not about the efficacy of the vaccine at that point. It's about your right to make your own medical decisions. And people that are concerned that we're now starting to see potential health side effects in otherwise healthy people are not mocking those people. Now, I do think, that being said, COVID vaccine skeptics should be careful, however understandable their concerns, however growing a body of evidence they can lean on, should be careful not to automatically attribute every single medical episode, every single cardiac event to the vaccine. I said that after Hamlin's collapse. I got a lot of flack on Twitter about it. I understand, and I think it is perfectly fine to ask the question whether or not this vaccine is causing cardiac problems among young, healthy people. Because I see a growing pile of evidence that that is very much the case. We even have some admissions now that that is in fact the case, and that Pfizer potentially knew about it before the vaccine was ever rolled out. But that wasn't information that was being readily made available to the public, and that's very concerning, and we should ask those questions. At the same time, just like I have a problem with blaming a woman's death on COVID when there's not evidence to suggest that that is in fact true, I do have a problem with every single cardiac event, every single athlete experiencing a medical emergency automatically being attributed to the vaccine. Because I think that what we have struggled with when it comes to COVID over the past couple of years is a very simple concept, and that is truth. That is fact and evidence-based truth. That has been what is lacking. So I don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction on the opposite side here, where now we start attributing every single medical emergency to the vaccine the way that leftists attributed every single death to COVID. You see what I'm saying? It's not about not being able to ask the question. It's about making assumptions and blasting it out there publicly as though this is fact. And I did see some of that when Hamlin did collapse. And I do think that that is something that vaccine skeptics maybe need to reel themselves back from a little bit, and let's wait for evidence to come out, because we're dealing with actual people who deserve real medical diagnoses and who don't necessarily deserve to be smeared all over the internet one way or the other as, you know, well, you were a COVID skeptic and you deserve what you got. Well, you took the jab and you deserve what you got. These are actual people and actual lives. So I think being respectful and waiting for evidence to come out is going to be important. But again, I don't see mockery. I don't see laughter. I don't see joy among the right when somebody collapses and it could be due to the effects of the vaccine. I see concern. I see sadness. I see genuine anger that this may have been something that this person was forced to take that's causing a problem for them now. That's the difference. No one is mocking Damar Hamlin. No one is laughing at people that are having medical episodes that could be attributed to a vaccine. Nobody thinks it's funny. At least not that I've seen. But leftists do think it's funny that this conservative woman passed away. And let's be honest, it's not just because it could be a point in their COVID column. This was an inconvenient Black woman. This was an African-American person. This was a woman. That's two categories that the left thinks that they have a monopoly on in this country. And not only was she conservative, she supported President Donald Trump, and that was inconvenient to liberals. She and her sister were inconvenient. And the left is happy that she's gone. And if COVID is the thing that took her out, all the better as far as they are concerned. But, you know, regardless of where you stand on all of this, regardless of where you stand on the COVID vaccine, we are all concerned, obviously, about our health. And at a time when the cost of healthcare is rapidly rising, feels like it never stops going up, we are also concerned about paying for it. So that is why you should look into Share Healthcare. So I'm partnering with Share Healthcare, have been for the last several weeks, to let people know about their Christian-based alternative to traditional health insurance. Share Healthcare is not health insurance. It is a cost-sharing program between people who don't want to pay exorbitant premiums for coverage that they don't need, or who don't want to subsidize medical costs that don't align with their faith-based values. So the average national cost for health insurance, believe it or not, is over $450 for one person. But with healthcare programs starting as low as $149 a month, Share Healthcare provides Americans with medical, financial, and religious freedom by offering share cost plans that align with their Christian values. So if you're interested in this, go over to sharehealthcare.com, enter the promo code MRCTV23. That's sharehealthcare.com, MRCTV23, and look for a plan that works for you and your family today. And while you're over on your laptop, by the way, also make sure you head over to mrc.org/donate to find out how you can partner with the Media Research Center to help support shows like The Brittany Hughes Show, other content that we have at mrctv.org. We are a 501c3, the MRC, the Media Research Center, is a completely nonprofit organization. That means we do not charge for our content, but we do rely on donations from people just like you, particularly people that give out of the generosity of their heart once a month, sometimes just a one-time donation. However much you feel like you can give, no matter how little, no matter how much, no amount is too little. We appreciate every single bit of support that we get. We also appreciate your support when you like and share these videos. So please continue to do that. We really appreciate it. But that's mrc.org/donate. It's got all the information you need right there. Of course, shockingly to everybody except everybody that's been paying attention, it turns out that vaccine pushers are in fact not the only ones who are jumping the gun to shove drugs and medical procedures down people's throats. And as we have seen with the transgender movement, those efforts are not just limited to adults. This is wild. As the mother of 2 children, I had to reread this about 4 times before I finally believed the words that I was reading. The American Academy of Pediatrics is now recommending medication and surgery for overweight children and teens, which they say may be necessary in not just some, but in many, if not most cases. Medication and surgery, as if we haven't put children on enough drugs and mutilated them in the names of all kinds of crap, as if we don't already push pills on small children enough. We already have a society that is rife with this issue. Why not throw some more meds at them, right? And if the pharmaceutical industry happens to benefit, you know, hey, all the better. Everybody loves kickbacks, right? The Associated Press reports, children struggling with obesity should be evaluated and treated early and aggressively, including with medications for kids as young as 12 and surgery for those as young as 13, according to new guidelines from the American Academy of Pediatrics, which as far as I'm concerned, may as well be toilet paper. This is garbage. Absolute garbage. And believe it or not, the hole that they are digging keeps getting deeper. The AP continues. For the first time, the group's guidance set ages at which kids and teens should be offered medical treatments such as drugs and surgery in addition to intensive diet, exercise, and other behavior and lifestyle interventions. In general, doctors should offer adolescents 12 and older who have obesity access to appropriate drugs, and teens 13 and older with severe obesity referrals for weight loss surgery. According to the article, Dr. Sandra Hassink, medical director for the AAP Institute for Healthy Childhood Weight, says this is not different than you have asthma, and now we have an inhaler for you. The group's guidance takes into consideration that obesity is a biological problem and that the condition is a complex chronic disease. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I am not arguing for a second. I think that it is pretty obvious that we have a health problem in this country in general, and that absolutely it is pervading children. It is affecting children. We have an overall health and an obesity problem in this country. Have for several decades now. This is a generational problem. This is not something that existed eons ago. This is, in the history of humanity and in the history of this country, a fairly recent phenomenon. And it is continuing to grow and affect our children. I don't think anybody is arguing that obesity and obesity among children and teens isn't a problem. But to immediately start pushing pills on these kids and recommending surgery, which is very invasive, all surgery comes with major risks, to automatically go to that level and to start recommending this for young children is absolutely insane. And to compare it to asthma is ridiculous. Asthma is a medical condition that in most cases cannot be helped. Obesity, more often than not, is caused by a lifestyle problem. It is caused by a poor diet, lack of exercise, and a general sedentary nature. That's why it's affecting adults that sit on their butts in an office all day. It's affecting people that eat quick meals rather than eat healthy and eat at home. It affects people that are low income, that live in food deserts, that don't have access to nutritional food. And it's affecting children who oftentimes are reaping the consequences of our adults' busy lives. This is the problem. But we don't want to be introspective. We don't want to look at why we are causing this. We don't want to look at why we are the problem for our children. When we tell them to go sit in school for hours a day, plunk down, they don't get enough exercise. We can't be bothered as adults who are so busy with our own working lives, with our own activities, with all of the stuff that we've got going on, oftentimes in families that are struggling under brokenness, and single parents are trying to be everything to their kids and trying to get everything done. We are so mind-blowingly busy that things like nutrition and good food and home cooking are oftentimes the first thing to get thrown out the window. Whether we mean to or not, we can't be introspective. We can't take a look at our own lives and our own culture. This is not the child's fault in the vast majority of cases. This is a cultural problem in which obesity, because again, we can't be introspective. We can't look at what we are doing that is causing this problem. We can't take a hard look at ourselves and our choices. Adults never want to do that, right? Because that's judgmental. We can't do that. So instead, we have this cultural phenomenon, this cultural push now, where obesity can't actually be called out as a health problem, right? We all have to watch Lizzo parade around a stage like a naked Michelin man, and nobody's allowed to say anything about it. Not only is that not worthy of criticism, it's laudable. We now have to praise people like that. That's body positivity. Lingerie companies are having to forego models and get rid of skinny people in favor of body positivity movements, in favor of putting obese women on posters so that everybody feels included. Regardless of whether or not it promotes health, regardless of whether or not, speaking of COVID, if COVID is really such a concern, if that was really a concern, we would be taking a hard look at obesity, a hard look at our diet, a hard look at, the health conditions that made it a lot more likely for somebody to suffer and die from COVID. You'd think if we would have learned anything from that experience, other than the government sucks, it's that maybe the way that we're taking care of ourselves sucks. But we can't do that because we can't shame anybody. So instead, magazines put pictures of obese people on their front covers, oftentimes obese women, because nobody wants to see some fat, hairy dude sitting there. You notice that the body positivity movement never really expanded to include guys. It expanded to include women, haha, pun intended. Because again, we want to make everybody feel included. And if they die of diabetes in the meantime, bummer, we just won't talk about it. And now that mindset, we're starting to see it really affecting our kids. Funny how that works. Funny how all of these bad habits and these terrible things and this garbage that we have adopted as adults to make ourselves feel better, it all ends up pervading our children. It all ends up filtering down into the next generation. And next thing you know, we end up with all kinds of problems and we sit there going, oh my gosh, we don't know what happened. Must be a disease. Throw some pills at it. Every time. Maybe this is actually the beginning or the problem. Maybe this is the problem. Did you know that the average child sits for 8.5 hours a day on their butts? That's on top of, by the way, the roughly 9 to 12 hours that they sleep at night, depending on what age group they fall into. 8.5 hours a day they spend sitting. According to a 2016 Washington Post article, at the beginning of the toddler period, which is about 12 to 14 months old, you see potato chips and soft drinks being introduced into their diet. More than 60% of children are eating fruit on any given day, but half of that comes from juice, which can be overloaded with sugars. Vegetables are more of a problem. On any given day, only 30% of 1-year-olds are eating vegetables, with the main source being whole or mashed potatoes. About 40% of them are filling their diets with things like brownies, cookies, crackers, and other salty snacks. Children at this age are consuming more than 5 teaspoons of added sugar and more than 1,500 milligrams of sodium a day, which is similar to what many nutritionists recommend as a limit for adults. According to a 2015 Time report, more than 1/3 of children and adolescents eat fast food on any given day. And those stats go on and on and on. Why? Because we as busy adults oftentimes are just trying to get our kids to eat anything. We are so overloaded getting from here to there. We are so overloaded with our own stuff. It's not that we don't care about our children. Look, I'm a mom of a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old. I understand that if I hand that kid a carrot, it's gonna be a battle. I get that. I know that and I'm not gonna sit here and claim to you that my kids have never eaten a French fry, because they have. But maybe it's time as adults, if this is really that big of a problem, if we are having an obesity issue among children to the point where experts are now recommending they go under the knife for it, maybe it's time for adults to take a hard look at what we're doing to contribute to that problem. Rather than just throwing more medication at our kids who are already over-medicated in general. We already medicate them for everything under the sun. The minute a little boy can't pay attention in school, we throw pills at him. It happens all the time. And do you think that the pharmaceutical industry is not sitting back and laughing all the way to the bank over this? These are doctors that are being paid to push this stuff. They get paid to sell drugs, which the pharmaceutical industry then gets rich off of. They get paid to schedule medical procedures. This is a self-licking ice cream cone for them. And that's not to say that all doctors are bad or there aren't any people in the pharmaceutical industry or any people in the medical industry that genuinely want positive, healthy outcomes for children that don't care about health. But when you are recommending pills and surgery for obesity for children, without maybe first, I don't know, suggesting that they put down the potato chips and eat an apple, without maybe first talking to the parent in a room about what can you do as an adult to make some lifestyle changes. It's one thing if a child has hormonal imbalances or something outside of the norm that is causing a problem for them. That does happen. But you cannot tell me that, with this doctor saying, well, this isn't actually a lifestyle problem, this is a disease. Really? Really? Because obesity among children seems to be a fairly new thing. You're telling me that all of a sudden there's some fat disease that just popped up and now all of our kids are just coming down with it left, right, and sideways? Really? It's a disease? No, it's not. In the vast majority of cases, it's a lifestyle problem. And it's a lifestyle problem that the adults in the room are responsible for. Just like it's oftentimes the choices that adults make that lead children to violence. It's the choices that adults make that cause children to end up with anxiety and depression. It's the choices that adults make for children to suffer from things like fatherlessness. It's the choices that adults make that lead to problems for children. And we need to start taking a hard look at that. And I don't know, maybe promoting obesity as body positivity is where we should start. Seems to me like as good a place as any. Because again, going back to where all of this started in this show, if we're going to talk about COVID and how people need to be making better risk assessments, maybe we don't promote obesity as some wonderful achievement in life or something to be glossed over or ignored at best. Seems like common sense to me. I don't know. But if you're concerned about your health, if you're concerned about how you're going to pay for it, make sure you head on over to sharehealthcare.com. Check out their cost-sharing plans. Again, the referral code there is MRCTV23 so that they'll know who sent you. Sharehealthcare.com. Head over to mrc.org/donate to figure out how you can partner with us at the Media Research Center. And while you're at it, as if I haven't already given you plenty of homework to do, make sure that you head on over to Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button on The Brittany Hughes Show. Make sure you subscribe to the Newsbusters podcast while you're over there. That's with Tim Graham on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. In the meantime, I will see y'all back here next Thursday. Have a blessed weekend.